Both fam, let's ride. Both fam, let's ride. Both fam, let's ride. Mic'd up, let's ride. Hella smooth though. Let's ride.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to again. I'm just dying still. Hopefully, you enjoyed our new countdown tonight. If you come in late, I'm sorry you missed it. But Tyler put instead of our regular countdown that's a minute long, looped in the Keenan Allen audio, which was fantastic from his mic'd up. So Tyler, thanks for that, man. How are you doing tonight?
Doing very well. I've been having an absolute ball this past week, and really capping it off was that Keenan Allen video. Just so good. And you can even tell like he is a musician and musical kind of guy, because he was changing things up and doing his little acting and whatnot, but then giggling through the whole thing. It was classic Keenan Allen, and it was so funny. Everybody loved it. People across the NFL were loving it. It was fantastic. Loved that segment.
Yeah, it really was. Keenan is so good in the mic'd up situations, and that was when you mentioned that you wanted to loop this in. I was like, okay, we have to do it today while it's still in people's memory. And I couldn't even get through the welcome in. So welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Alex is here as well, man. Alex, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. With our luck, the Chargers are going to copyright strike that, and we'll have to edit it in Canva somehow.
Yeah, it's all good. We'll trim it up on YouTube or something like that. So great stuff from Keenan Allen. So as we said on Twitter, we are here today to talk about, of course, the latest news and notes from Chargers training camp. I'm excited to get into a lot of this. Obviously, we haven't been together since Saturday, and the Chargers have had 3 practices to talk about. 2 of them were padded. Today was not a padded practice, and there were some veterans who took the day off as well. So we'll get into some of that. We do have to start with some injury news and notes. Unfortunately, linebacker Drue Tranquill still not practicing with the team due to his groin injury. Kyle Van Noy also had a rest day today. So obviously Tranquill has not practiced for quite a while. It's only been a few days, but in his absence before today, it was Kyle Van Noy and Troy Reeder getting the reps. After Kyle Van Noy got his rest day today, it was Nick Niemann working with the first team defense today alongside Troy Reeder. So, Alex, we'll start with you. Any concern here about Tranquill's injury? Do you expect this to be something that potentially causes him to go down the depth chart at all? Where are you at with Tranquill's injury right now?
No, I don't think it causes him to go down the depth chart, because their depth chart is really thin at the position, right? Like, I don't think Nick Niemann's going to suddenly leave him. I don't think Amen Ogbongbemiga is suddenly going to leave him. So his job is safe as, middle linebacker too, as long as Kyle Van Noy's there. The concern to me is just the groin injury and the nature of it, and the fact that, you kind of want to play it safe because it's the preseason, but also now you're down Kenneth Murray. Now you're down Drue Tranquill for at least a little bit here. And so now, like today, Troy Reeder and Nick Niemann are your starting middle linebackers, a month out or so from the season. Not great in terms of like defensive planning. Again, not the end of the world either, because we know eventually Kenneth Murray will come back. Eventually Drue Tranquill pretty quickly here should come back. Also just a little bit nervous just because, groin injuries, hamstring injuries have a pretty high reoccurrence rate. So that's something that the Chargers, of course, with Staley's focus on sports performance, will work on in general. Not a high level of concern for me, but just not good. And the more names you see, piling up on the injury report, it reminds you football's back, I guess.
Yeah, there was a certain comforting, warm feeling of seeing the injury list start to be like close to double digits. Like, okay, Chargers football is back. As far as Tranquill goes, it's tough to gauge whether I am supposed to be concerned or not. Like, yeah, him sitting out multiple practices, not great. At the same time, how important is all of this? Is it maybe even more important to get someone like Nick Niemann, Troy Reeder, Amen, oh my gosh, what's his name? Damon Lloyd, these guys more involved? maybe. So it's just a problem because he's just a guy who's always been injured at some point, whether it's season ending by the second play or missing 4 games. Last year he started, I'm sure you watch this now watching the defense. He started on a tear. Then he got hurt, I believe, one of the final plays against the Browns. And it really wasn't quite the same for a while after that. Maybe he kind of returned to form towards the end of the year, but he never really fully recovered and reestablished himself. So I would hope that this groin injury doesn't bug him too much. As far as the depth chart goes, if it were more of like a 1A, 1B with Troy Reeder, then maybe I'd be more concerned for his job security. But it's been pretty definitively Drew Tranquil as the linebacker 2, I guess, as that will linebacker. So not super concerned. If, though, it does give Nick Niemann more run with the groups, with even a starting group, no less, I'm fine with that. Nick Niemann, to me, is starting to maybe be what kind of Braden Fehoko has been for us, which is like, okay, the numbers match, like the film matches, what's there. Yeah. Why is he not getting more playing time? In the preseason, he was outstanding. He led every NFL defender, rookie, veteran, whatever, any position in run stops, 2 pressures, 1 sack or whatever it was. I want to see him get more run. So it's not the worst thing that he's hurt. If it gets more guys more playing time for a little bit, great. That said, it is hopefully something that gets resolved sooner rather than later. I do want to see him somewhat healthy because I really would not want to see the linebacker rotation already be down 2 of their initial projected starters. Now with Kyle Van Noy, it's a different role now, but
Yeah, we'll certainly talk about Kenneth Murray. Brandon Staley did give a little update on him as well. With the Tranquil thing and their situation at linebacker, I'm almost at the point where I am kind of grateful for him being injured, especially if you're taking Kyle Van Noy and today he's getting the day off, or maybe gets back to getting some edge reps, because then you get those young guys a lot of reps. And the Nick Niemann thing is interesting because up until this week it had been Amen and even Damon Lloyd working with the second team, and Nick Niemann was working with the third team when everybody was healthy outside of Kenneth Murray, of course. So Niemann getting these first team reps, I think, is super important for him. He's been fantastic. I think he had a sack yesterday in practice, according to Daniel Popper. 2 sacks, looks like Tyler says. So he's having a good week, and I think they rewarded him for it. And Damon Lloyd also has had a lot of good practices, flashing some potential. So haven't heard a ton about Eamon Ogbongbemiga, but these younger guys are taking advantage of their reps, and so Drew Tranquil being out, not necessarily the worst thing in the world.
My question only would be, I don't know the nature of who was in what spot. When Niemann was in and Reeder was in, was Niemann the Mike then? Because Reeder's been playing a lot of Will, or was it flip-flopped? I don't know, actually.
With Niemann today, I assume Reeder was taking the Mike calls.
Okay, that's what I would guess, but of course Reeder's not been playing that, so I was just curious. Okay, that makes sense.
I think they have kind of a defined skill set there, which is why it automatically went to like Kyle Van Noy as the Mike, and Tranquil stayed at the Will. Mm-hmm. So you lose Tranquil, you put in Troy Reeder, and I mean there's some flexibility there, but I think Niemann and Tranquil are clearly like Will linebackers, whereas Reeder and Van Noy can kind of do both spots. But I don't really want Niemann and Tranquil to be kind of on the strong side in the middle of things as opposed to the other guys.
Yeah, makes sense. And listen, I think we're headed to the point, just like Kaiser White, if not more obvious, that they are going to move on from Tranquil next year. They can't afford him next year. So I'm happy to see Niemann kind of work his way into this role that, I mean, maybe he is starting next year.
So I mentioned Kenneth Murray. We'll talk about him, and then we'll mention some of the other guys that missed practice today. Brandon Staley was asked about his situation because I guess, according to Daniel Popper, Kenneth Murray was seen off to the side today with pads and a helmet on, which I thought was very interesting. He was only doing individual things. So they are starting to ramp up his recovery process. However, Brandon Staley said that they're still not close to seeing him get on the field, but he is making progress. So he maintained again that their goal has been to get Murray back on the field during training camp, and he still thinks that is a realistic goal. So that is where Kenneth Murray is at in his recovery process.
I hope it's a realistic goal. I think we're really a month away. I mean, they said 4 to 6 weeks last week. So if we're working off of that timetable, that still puts us the week before the Raiders game in week 1. I don't know at this point. And with the linebackers already kind of as thin as they are, makes you more worried about it. I guess it's good to hear that he had pads and a helmet, but he's also not going to play for a while. So, nothing new, I guess we learned today, other than there's some optimism he, can be back before the season starts, and that optimism is still there. But I think as the days wane on and, Kenneth Murray's like just kind of doing his thing to the side or just not really clearly he's with the team in the study room and stuff like that still, but still being on the PUP list, I guess a week out from the first preseason game, not like he was going to play anyway. Just not great all around.
Yeah, for me, I'm just happy to see it. I'm glad he's ramping sort of up to whatever it's going to be.
Sure.
Honestly, watching Kyle Van Noy out there, I would be very concerned about my job security if he's only set and defined as the Mike for this team, and if Tranquil is healthy and as the weak side linebacker. I would get out there too and show that I'm somewhat trying to get back. He is a tough guy. I know he's played through injuries. He's fought through some stuff. So I expect him to get out there maybe faster than they expected, as long as it's within his power, where the surgery was not. But, to me, I'm glad he's getting healthy. That's great. He needs to be. He absolutely needs to be. I just don't know if Kyle Van Noy is as good at Mike linebacker and as Staley's guy and a guy they paid, a decent amount of money to. What are the odds, especially of Tranquil being maybe hit or miss here, that Murray switches back to Will?
Well, that's what he was doing last year, because last year Kaiser White
Right.
was the Mike linebacker from the start. So I think Murray could do both. I believe that he can play in the middle and play in the trenches, but I think it's easier for him from a mental standpoint to play as the weak side linebacker, where you're just playing a little bit more free, being more of a space and chase linebacker, as opposed to, taking on lead blockers, having to, sift through all this traffic and things like that. So there is an advantage for Kenneth Murray to play the weak side linebacker. And I think, it's got to be a really tough situation for him and the team in terms of balancing, okay, we want you to get back on the field, but also we have this long-term investment into you. And, the sports performance has been very clearly, patient with injuries. And so I'm sure that it's a delicate balance in rushing him back and not rushing him back, and hoping that he's able to recover long-term from this injury. So the other injuries, of course, should mention that Donald Parham has been back on the field. Can't wait to talk about that tight end position later today. So he looks healthy, ready to go. Not practicing today were Tavon Campbell, Trey McKitty, and Jason Moore, as well as Mark Webb. Brandon Staley did not specify what kind of injuries they had, but they are all dealing with soft tissue injuries, and they're all considered day to day. So some of that could just be that they're dealing with a little tight hamstring, tight quad, something like that. It seemed like today was kind of a low-key practice in general. A lot of veteran guys taking rest days during the 11-on-11 period. So that could be just them dealing with some soreness from training camp, having two very intense padded practices, and the team not wanting to risk any further injury.
McKitty's been dealing with the same injury, right? Because I think yesterday he was also out. Am I wrong? Maybe I'm wrong.
I think McKitty was practicing yesterday.
Yeah, I don't remember him being out yesterday.
Never mind. Well, either way, it seems like there's a bit of an opening here for Hunter Campmoyer. I don't know how much of one, but you pointed out the 3 tight end sets today that did involve Campmoyer. Granted, Everett was not in that group because he was, resting or had to sit out or whatever. It does seem like there is an opportunity for Campmoyer here, especially with McKitty, maybe some sort of injury here.
Yeah, I think the door's still pretty closed on Campmoyer unless they keep like a tight end 4 and go that route. Because when McKitty comes back, I mean, they've invested a pick into him. I don't think they're going to give up too quickly on him.
Well, yeah, I don't mean like that. I just mean like a 4th tight end.
Yeah, the door's certainly open for that possibility, given the fact that they kept 4 tight ends last year. So who knows? Not a whole lot, I guess, to say, other than the secondary is a little bit concerning at this point, because now you have Tavon Campbell, Mark Webb, all go down. We'll talk about Michael Davis a little bit later. Not a great performance from Michael Davis to this point in training camp. So yeah, the secondary definitely looking a little thin. Obviously, Derwin not out there for contract reasons. So it just feels like, much like the linebacker room, a little bit. Maybe the secondary guys are all back tomorrow and they're all practicing, but it just feels like a get through it stage of camp for all those guys. So that's really the thing to watch going forward, and just hope that everyone's healthy and there's no injuries, because Brandon Staley did really tuck up Mark Webb quite a bit. So it would really be a shame to see him be just plagued with injuries through training camp again.
Yeah. We've been really excited about Mark Webb and his potential this year. Raheem Lane, the undrafted free agent, is kind of flashing as well, according to Daniel Popper. So the safety depth this year is really, really good, I think. But hopefully Webb is able to get back. Obviously, he had the knee injury. So I hope this is nothing related to that. So, of course, in terms of news, I'm seeing people talk about it in the chat. So Derwin James obviously has not signed his extension yet at this point. We had heard that potentially it was maybe this past weekend thing, still not necessarily happening. Again, I don't need to see Derwin James on the field to know that he's going to be ready to go. And Tyler's talked about this. He's had some issues with injuries in training camp. So I don't have any quarrel with what is happening right now. Derwin is still on the field. He's still coaching up his guys. He's still being a good teammate. The deal is going to get done. I think everybody involved has said as much. Arjun has kind of speculated that they're maybe potentially dealing with just the year-to-year structure in terms of guaranteed money, as opposed to like the actual number and things like that. So, of course, I wish the deal were done. Could stop talking about it in a negative connotation on Twitter. But it's going to get done. I think we just need to be a little bit more patient. This is a top of the market deal, and sometimes these take time. I mean, Keenan Allen's contract didn't get signed until leading up to the second week of the preseason that year. So just be a little patient. It's going to get done. Don't go to worst case scenarios and talk about Eric Weddle, because these situations are not alike at all.
Yeah, Twitter.com is not exactly a place where patience is a virtue when it comes to tens of millions of dollars being on the table.
True.
So I think that's part of our problem here.
Sure.
I still have full confidence that the Derwin James deal gets done. Chargers can't afford it from their end to not have him, for the long term. I think that, obviously, he's going to play under a full contract this year as well. So it just makes too much sense for both sides to not agree to a deal at this point. And it seems like everything's amicable. Derwin James would not, if he was in a real contract dispute on the Chargers, be, coaching up Raheem Lane in practice, right? And being off to the side with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa working on edge stuff, right? So if this wasn't an amicable situation, Derwin James would either, not be there like Melvin Gordon a few years ago, or, he would be off to the side, just not interacting with anyone. Right. So I think pretty clear from all parties, all sides involved, that this will get done. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, I almost think everyone at this point, within their own knowledge of whatever they think they know or do know, everything else is mostly sorted out. It just comes down to the injury guarantees and just the little things that are slightly different than Minka Fitzpatrick's contract, where he's played, 2,000 more snaps. So it's just like, okay, you need to just make more money than the next guy. And Derwin James will make more money in terms of APY than Minka, but it's different when it comes to guarantees. The Chargers have been giving a lot of guarantees, but there's also this whole, injury concern in years. I forget what Arjun was saying, 3 and 4 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I'm not concerned. He's out there working pass rush drills with Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. I'm not worried at all. I would just like to get it done so I can move on with my life.
I feel that. So we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some players who have stood out. Obviously, we wish that Tyler could be there in person to confirm some of this, but we have to go off of beat writer information over the past couple of days. So we'll talk about some of the guys who have been standing out really quickly. Shout out to Carter for the super chat. Very interesting question here in terms of Jerry Tillery, but appreciate the extra super chat. So any of you guys have anything to say about Jerry Tillery and his odds of winning MVP?
I think Tillery's odds of winning MVP are the 6th longest in the defensive tackle room. So, like,
so there's a chance.
Yeah, there's a chance.
Saying there's a chance.
You would have like Sebastian Joseph Day at like 900 to 1, and then you have like Braden Fehoko at like 1400 to 1, and you just have like Jerry Tillery at like 2700 to 1 or something like that.
Oh man, good stuff. So I kind of wanted to frame this next part of the conversation in terms of like checking in on the position battles that have been happening that we talked about. Of course, we did a full preview of every single position battle. And so for me, I would like to start this conversation with the 3rd cornerback on the depth chart. I think we all kind of agreed that was essentially going to be Bryce Callahan. That was our pick. And we've heard a lot of plays being made from every single cornerback has made a lot of good plays on this team so far. We talked about Dean Leonard. Tyler had his great interview. Bryce Callahan is showing up every single day, and he's making great plays on the ball. He's making tackles in space. It was a little unfair today of him. You know, they were asking him to cover Donald Parham, who's like literally a whole foot taller than him. But Bryce Callahan has been such a good presence for this team so far, showing up, like I said, in every single which way. And there's no question to me that he is far and away the corner 3 of choice over Michael Davis, who we have heard nothing about in terms of positivity. He was getting burned by Joe Reed in practice yesterday, according to Daniel Popper, which is not necessarily, I know we all like Joe Reed, but that's not where you want to be. So this cornerback 3 battle is not really much of a battle right now. And part of that is because Michael Davis is struggling, and that is unfortunate in and of itself. But Bryce Callahan has been extremely impressive so far throughout camp.
Yeah, I don't think it's a debate anymore. Bryce Callahan is very clearly quarterback 3. Maybe there was something to start camp, but it sort of just felt that way coming in. And maybe the writing was on the wall when the Chargers built that contract into Michael Davis anyway, and Brandon Staley drafted Asante Samuel Jr. without even seeing him play. And, you know, just within the past year, you have J.C. Jackson, Bryce Callahan being added, and then Dean Leonard and John Taylor in the draft, right? So, I mean, Brandon Staley has been very upfront about, without saying it, what he thinks about Michael Davis and what he thinks about the cornerback room and where it needed to go. So I don't think there's any chance that Michael Davis is cut just because they still need him. You know, whether it's talking about Darren Waller and Travis Kelce and how he helps in those matchups and just for depth in general, it doesn't make any sense to cut him at this point. You just kind of be, you know, cutting your nose off your face, you know, when that comes to that kind of stuff and shaving your depth away versus cutting him next offseason. But yeah, no. You know, he also did get burnt by DeAndre Carter for a touchdown today. Would be remiss if I did not point that out. That was one of his.
We're going to talk about DeAndre
touchdowns today. Worry. Sorry, I get a little carried away. Sorry, got excited. But yeah, no, it stinks, I guess, to hear that there's nothing positive about Michael Davis, but I can't say I'm too surprised because we saw how he fit out of the Staley scheme last year. We saw that Staley brought in cornerbacks like Bryce Callahan to fit more into what his vision and what his mold for this team is. So yeah, I think it's very clearly Bryce Callahan at this point.
Yeah, it wasn't mini camp. It was the first day of camp. Davis was clear. Like it's very clear there's a cutoff. There's a starting 3, and there's a next rotation of guys. Michael Davis is just not part of that starting unit. I will say through camp, like the gimme interception that he had before that, I thought he was going to jump a route. The ball went into the dirt. So I thought he could have had a pick 6 before that. The thing with Davis really, and it's so strikingly obvious what Staley wants and asks of his DBs, Davis is just not making plays on the football. Everybody else is. Everybody else has. And that doesn't even mean that Davis has been bad. I have never, like, watching practice so far, I never said, oh, God, there goes Davis getting roasted by this player. I have yet to really see that. But you're just not seeing what Staley is valuing right now in his scheme and with these players, which is ball production. Everybody. I think everyone has an interception, it feels like. Tavon Campbell, great interception. Callahan's got one. Everybody's got one, except Davis, I'm pretty sure, so far. Not that that's the most important thing, but he's not getting those positive plays. And if you're not making like a positive difference, like the offense is designed to beat you, the defense. In the NFL, the offense is going to score. It's intended to be like that. So you have to make these positive plays, interceptions, passes broken up, whatever, when you can. And if you're not doing that, which Davis didn't do last year, what good are you? Like, the offense is going to beat you anyway. So if you can't even make the positive plays, getting your hands on the ball, you're not really going to be part of the starting unit. And he hasn't been. I'm really looking forward to the scrimmage. Like, the scrimmage to me, and I suppose the preseason, depending on how much he plays, but the scrimmage is going to tell me, like, okay, what does it actually look like when Davis is in a game setting now in this second year of the system sort of thing? Like, maybe, he's getting burned by these guys, but it's not fair. Like, you rotate in covering guy you've never covered before, or it's 1v1s, and it's tough because these last 2 days we hear Davis struggling, but I haven't been there, so I don't really know what the context really is for these. So I would love to see at the scrimmage how he holds up. That said, people are talking about trading him, cutting him. He's still very valuable. Like, I still do not want to drop off from him to somebody else just because we cut or traded him. So, yes, he is playing special teams, by the way. Well, I don't know if he's playing special teams for Dual 12, who's asking in the chat, but all the DBs that aren't JC Jackson are being asked to contribute on special teams. So, yeah, I think Michael Davis will be headed for a strong special teams role.
Yeah, Popper said that he was working as a gunner today, along with all the other DBs that you mentioned, as well as Palmer, Guyton, I think DeAndre Carter as well. So he'll have a role there. But, and to be clear about Michael Davis and him, it's not necessarily that he's struggling. Again, like, it sounds like he struggled the last couple of days. But, the corner position, like, in order to make plays, like, you have to be throwing the ball. Like, people have to throw the ball your way. And we just haven't heard of that really happening all that much up until the last 2 days. So he could have certainly been having good practices, just not getting targeted. That is also a possibility, to be fair to him. But like Alex is saying, I think, we're trying to head into this conversation in this training camp with, okay, we're going to have a legitimate competition. And, Ronaldo Hill has talked about this a bunch of times. Like, guys did not have that threat of competition last year. Well, this year they do. And everybody else is making all these plays, and Dean Leonard is looking great and earning reps with the first team. And, Jaw Taylor, gets a whole 10-minute practice session with Brandon Staley and then comes out and makes some plays. And Taywan Campbell made some plays yesterday in practice. So I hope that Michael Davis comes back the rest of this week, and particularly in the scrimmage, like Tyler mentioned, as somebody that is going to make some plays on the football, make some plays as a tackler, because he is valuable. Like, if Michael Davis is your fourth corner, your cornerback room is doing pretty good. If Taywan Campbell's your fourth corner, or Dean Leonard's your fourth corner, then I think we have some question marks there. But, Michael Davis can still bring some value, even if he's overpaid technically by, the position standards.
Yeah, just a clarification on the gunner thing, because Popper published this thing like 4 minutes ago. It was Davis, Keemon Hall, Jalen Guyton, Dean Leonard, Jaw Taylor, Josh Palmer, Joe Reed, JT Woods, in terms of who was in the gunners. And then, as we said earlier, Hunter Kampmoyer filled in for Tranquil when it came to special teams duties. So
Woods being a gunner is I know we don't get too excited about special teams, but
yeah,
a 4-2 JT Woods being gunner makes too much sense.
Yeah. Yeah, they were talking about like Keemon Hall and Jalen Guyton. Like, I would totally understand both of those, but if JT Woods can play gunner, just let him do it. Yeah, no, I think what Tyler said about ball production definitely is true. Michael Davis is not going to be like the cornerback who's always like breaking up passes, right? I mean, he sort of came up in this Gus Bradley system where it's just more one-on-one coverage, right? If the ball like gets thrown your way, a la, the Tom Brady interception, then, you make a play on that. But aside from that, I do think the ball production has been lacking, which is why Staley has favored Asante Samuel Jr. and Bryce Callahan and J.C. Jackson and all these guys who are going to create interceptions. Michael Davis's only interception was created by Jamar Chase last year, who dropped the ball into Michael Davis's hands.
The weirdest play. I watched that on film the other day, and I was like, how?
I still don't understand how it happened, but I'll take it, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, Michael Davis has never been an interception creator, right? Like, when he was at his peak in 2020, it was more just like he's your one-on-one coverage guy. And when he's like really good at that in a 4-3 system, it's going to look great on film. But I do think what Tyler was pointing out, and just the amount of interceptions he's not going to create, the amount of pass breakups he's not going to create, it's not necessarily a necessity for him, because like Steven said, that could just be that he was playing good coverage and he didn't get targeted, and that'll be the case in some games, but he got burnt more last year than he did in 2020. So that's another thing to point out, in addition to not creating ball production in a Staley system. Other than that, I guess there's not much to say about Michael Davis really, other than he's still obviously a vital part to this team, like we said, in this quarterback room. But yeah, definitely stock neutral or stock down to this point.
So apparently, Michael Davis jumped offsides on defense.
I think that was Jamal. Would that be Jamal Davis?
But then it says Davis jumped offsides and made contact with the receiver on the outside.
Oh, I misread that then.
So
never know with Staley. Maybe he's training Jamal Davis to be a corner. Never know.
True. Outside corner. Yeah.
Yeah. Take that 245 frame and go play some outside corner. All right. Next position battle that I wanted to shift to is kind of the defensive tackle room. Another day, another Braden Fehoko tackle for loss. Our guy has just been on fire recently, and similarly to Michael Davis, we have yet to hear of any splash plays being made by Jerry Tillery or Morgan Fox for that matter. But Braden Fehoko showing up every single day and putting in some work. So he got some run with the first team one-on-ones, according to Daniel Popper, on the first day of pads, which was, you love to hear it. You love to see that. And he's dancing at practice with Keenan Allen. He's dancing at practice with Sebastian Joseph Day. So Braden Fehoko living his best life right now, and you love to see it.
Oh my gosh, I love to see it, man. Like, we've been waiting for something like this. Like, we talked about, even when they signed Morgan Fox, like, there's going to be competition for a spot, and maybe, like, just maybe, they're going to let the best. Now, granted, they could still cut Fehoko. This still might completely happen, but it looks like they're allowing competition, and like, some guys are really stepping up because of it, and Fehoko's one of them. Like you said, he's out there having fun. He's dancing with players. He's having a ball, and then he puts his hands in the dirt and is absolutely killing Will Clapp, Brendan Hymus right now. I wouldn't say he's MVP of training camp so far. I don't think you can be at his position, but in terms of like consistent production on defense and being like taking advantage of your snaps, he's been one of the best guys out there. And if they go a route where they go with Christian Covington, like, do I think they're going to cut Fehoko for Jerry Tillery? I don't think so. I think those are two different players and situations.
Right.
But if they, at this point, I will be distraught if they cut Fehoko for Covington because he's a veteran and they like him or something. Like, he, to me, now has this roster spot close to locked up. If it's based on the merit of their performances so far in camp, I think Fehoko has the shot this locked up right now, and I love to see it. Now, on the flip side, though, I will, to your other point, I'm a little surprised I haven't seen anything from Morgan Fox yet. Like, I don't, you know, I miss things, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's on the far side of the field, and certainly, you know, in the preseason scrimmage, maybe we'll see more from Morgan Fox, but it's been pretty quiet so far. Like, I guess, thankfully, you know, when they're doing their base 3-4 initially, it was kind of a Fox Tillery rotation. But now, because they're just in nickel all the time, Fox isn't really doing anything with the first team. So it's just Fox and Tillery with that second unit in base nickel. And I'm not hearing anything from either of them. Like, nobody's separating from the other person. It might as well be Otito at this point. Not really, but like, no one's really doing anything. So I'm not concerned. I'm not hearing anything from Morgan Fox. Not yet, but I'd like to see something. I don't even think in any of Popper's pieces Fox has been mentioned. Like, he's just kind of there. Same with Christian Covington.
Sometimes it's better to be there, though, than be there for the wrong reasons, which is why we've heard Jerry Tillery's name come up, whether it's almost hitting Justin Herbert or getting thrown to the ground by Zion Johnson.
That's true.
So,
that is very
true.
true.
You know, so there have been more negative plays. I mean, again, this is all, I'm not there. I'm just reading things. But we have heard those things about Jerry Tillery in a way that, even though Morgan Fox is not breaking away from the pack or anything, I do think the coaching staff notices those things as well. I guess going to Jerry Tillery first, I'm starting to think there's a real possibility he's cut.
Really? All right.
I'm there. I guess, in a very Michael Davis kind of way that we frame that discussion, like we've always just been like, oh, he's going to be on the team, right? And I still think he's going to be on the team because of what they need at corner and because of, how his physical skill set separates from other guys. What does Jerry Tillery do that Joe Gaziano can't?
Well, that's a different story. I completely
But
that argument I understand.
No. But it's the same question, right? If you're keeping like those defensive tackles, and you're like, okay, well, obviously Morgan Fox is making the team, but it's Jerry. Who would you take, Jerry Tillery or Joe Gaziano, right? Like for a lot of reasons like that, for the answer to that coaching staff, it might be Jerry Tillery. But we've heard more positive things about Gaziano so far. We've heard more positive things about guys that are down the roster who are, pass rushing DTs than we have about Jerry Tillery. And they turned down the 5th-year option. It would be another thing if they accepted it and we would know he was a virtual lock to make the roster. They have no financial ramifications from cutting Jerry Tillery now, and other players like Braden Fehoko, like Joe Gaziano, are outperforming him at camp. So the fact that he's only here on a 1-year deal, effectively, I still, again, if you put a gun to my head, if I had to make a bet, I would still bet that Jerry Tillery makes the roster. But this is the first time that I really thought that there's a statistical chance, probably around 15 or 20%, that he is cut. And I think that that's fair at this point. As far as Braden Fehoko, it sounds like everything's going great. I know Tyler's obviously very happy about this development. But yeah, no, I think Braden Fehoko, just getting in there and making plays and separating himself from Christian Covington and getting guys excited, that is a great thing here, just because they need as many, run stuffing DTs as they can get, especially for last year. So if you have another guy that is reliable after Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson, it would be great. And we've heard great things about those two through training camp as well. But yeah, my takeaway from the first week is definitely that Jerry Tillery has lost more than I thought he was capable of losing, I guess, just in terms of the fact that I still thought he was a lock to make the team heading in here. And I don't know if I feel that way anymore.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of camp remaining that could certainly change that. And so to be fair to Jerry Tillery, of course, you have to say the same thing for Michael Davis. But, it's just like you be patient for, the pads to come on, and you're hoping for these plays to be made, whether that come through 1-on-1 reps or 11-on-11s or whatever. And we just haven't heard much about it. So, just to be clear, in terms of like the order here, it does sound like Braden Fehoko is kind of creating a stranglehold on whether you think it's DT4 or DT5. It sounds like he is essentially locking Christian Covington out of the room and saying, this is my spot. So on Monday, when they did 1-on-1s, Daniel Popper basically laid it out that they had like a first team group, offensive line, defensive line, and then they shifted in like the second group for both sides. And so Braden Fehoko, Jerry Tillery, Morgan Fox, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Austin Johnson were the 5 first team defensive tackles, if you will. And then the next group, Christian Covington was there along with Otito, Forrest Merrill, Andrew Brown, and I think somebody else that is like an undrafted free agent or something like that. So anytime that there's a switch on second team defense, that's where Braden Fehoko is. He's gotten some first team reps as well. And Christian Covington is almost consistently with the third team. So right now, the coaching staff is telling us that Fehoko is the lead candidate there. That really is just going to come down to roster construction, because like, I think if they keep 6, he's safe. But if they're talking about 5, then you're talking about Tillery, Fox versus Fehoko, or Covington, or not Covington, excuse me, Tito versus Fehoko, and then you're talking about draft capital, things like that. So he still needs them to keep 6, but if they do, I think he is safe.
Yeah, that's definitely the big question, right? Do they keep 6? And then, I mean, right now in terms of performance, he is ahead of Otito. It's just obviously, like you said, the draft pick, the sort of thing. They got to find a way. If they keep fucking Easton Stick or Larry Roundtree or anybody else over the guy who has like 2 tackles for loss per practice, I mean, cut Brendan Hymus over Fehoko. No offense, but Fajoko's taking his lunch money.
Whoa,
So far.
I don't know. Steven,
They
Steven,
won't do
those are close to fighting words, man.
Steven was
It's a
much more
trench guy
hesitant
for
on
trench
that
guy
one.
swap. Okay, it's like a big ugly
I'll
for a
take
big
it. I'll
ugly.
take it. Yeah.
All right, yeah. Okay.
You're not cutting Hymus to keep Easton's tick though. That's a fighting word right there.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on here. I want to, of course, have to talk about the running back situation. The Chargers have definitely needed some clarity here. So I know that there was some reporting that Isaiah Spiller was taking reps with the first team. According to Daniel Popper, that did not happen until today. Today was the first time that Isaiah Spiller had consistent time with the first team. He's mostly been with the second and third team. So up until today, it's been Joshua Kelly or Larry Roundtree, sometimes both, kind of splitting duties with the first team and second team. So Daniel Popper mentioned yesterday that Spiller's physicality, his burst has really started to show up. Now that they have pads on, they're starting to notice a little bit more of the physicality that Spiller brings to the team. And I think they rightfully are kind of easing him into potential first team reps. So that's where Spiller stands. There's been a lot of good things said about Joshua Kelly, including by Austin Eckler, who said that he looks like his rookie self. Daniel Popper today said that he's been an explosive back so far throughout camp. Again, Larry Roundtree has had some good moments, sounds like. But reading the tea leaves a little bit here, it does sound like Joshua Kelly is at least beginning to separate himself from Larry Roundtree and any of the undrafted free agents. My guy Kevin Marks did have a fumble today, so I hate to see that. But that's where the running back stands, at least from my vantage point right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Eckler, Kelly, and Spiller, and that's how Popper listed them in his article, by the way, in terms of 1, 2, 3, working with the first team right now. That seems to be the order, and I guess that I still haven't budged. Well, I guess in that roster or training camp battles thing we did put Roundtree first. Okay, addendum to that. But yeah, we'll put Kelly as RB2 for now. But yeah, no, I still think they end up keeping 4 running backs. I do think we've heard positive enough things about Larry Roundtree, and obviously his use on special teams still, that they'll keep him, and you'll probably run with 4. I guess the 2 takeaways from running back for me are that Marks and Brown are done.
Pretty much,
that is how it sounds like. Again, maybe one of them, kind of like Eckler said, makes a big play on special team scout team that gets them noticed, but they're certainly not going to be able to get noticed in camp. And they probably get some run in the preseason, but they're already kind of using the preseason for Kelly, Spiller, and Roundtree, right? Obviously with Eckler not playing in the preseason. So that is kind of my big takeaway. I think those 2 are probably out of the running to potentially be an RB3 or an RB4. There was probably a really small chance of that anyway. The Spiller thing is interesting just because I think that they intend for him to kind of start out the season by splitting his reps probably with Joshua Kelly and then having him sort of, increase throughout the season. But yeah, it sounds like everything is on track for Joshua Kelly to start the season as RB2 or for Kelly and Spiller to sort of start the season as 2A and 2B, if we want to put it that way. Because I do think Isaiah Spiller eventually overtakes him. I do think something that plays into this is obviously, Spiller's age and his youth, as much as the coaching staff does believe in him, right? He was the youngest player in the draft. I think they want to kind of give him time to marinate in camp in the preseason before he fully takes that RB2 or even some kind of RB1A, 1B role with Eckler, right? So I think they're going to give that some time. But pretty clear from all indications that you have your 3 running backs who are running with the first team right now. All of those guys are locks to make the roster, and Roundtree probably makes the rosters sort of where we stand today.
Yeah, I actually agree with you that Joshua Kelly probably is RB2 to start the season. I think in terms of rushing attempts, I think that seems like a lock at this point. I do think in terms of rushing attempts, barring some sort of injury, Kelly would be the RB2, and Spiller be more your receiving back. Maybe he'll get more touches, but I think Kelly, in terms of rushing attempts, is your RB2. As far as the running backs go, I started the first camp with thinking that, oh my gosh, they're only keeping 3 running backs because Roundtree barely touched the ball at all, and then he fumbled.
Yeah.
So I figured, oh, okay, they're going with 3 running backs. And then he fumbled. So maybe this is good for Kevin Marks. The next couple of days, Roundtree was with the first team. So I was like, okay, maybe, there's just a nice little battle. They'll go back and forth. But it's really, the momentum has shifted back and away from Roundtree. I still think they're going with 3 running backs. I did a 53-man roster projection for our YouTube members and Patreon supporters only, and I didn't have 4 running backs making the roster. Could it be Roundtree over Kelly? Sure, but I really think that it's 3 running backs at this point, and I think they have a nice little group going. It's very clear that based on what they're doing that they want 3. They don't know who the third is, or I guess the second, depending on how you look at it. But it just really seems like they are going to keep 3 this year. And, cut Roundtree, or not cut Roundtree. Well, yeah, cut Roundtree in favor of someone like Fehoko.
God, Tyler, please speak into existence. Please, just keep going.
Well, I think Roundtree's playing it into existence.
Yeah.
Hope so.
I think, again, we'll learn more about how they're doing in terms of rushing attempts, right? But, I kind of harken back to what it was like early on in the season, where they kind of had Justin Jackson almost exclusively playing as like a receiver role. And then, it was either Roundtree or Kelly were kind of carrying the ball. And maybe that's kind of how they start out with Isaiah Spiller and then kind of ease him back into it. Somebody did point out to me on Twitter that I guess in rookie mini camps, Joe Lombardi did say something about how young Spiller was and how they might have to be a little bit more like cautious with overloading him because he's not a 22-year-old rookie. He's a 20-year-old rookie, as opposed to somebody like Justin Herbert, who was, a bit older or something like that. So maybe something to keep an eye on. Again, today was the first time, according to Daniel Popper, that he was working with the first team. So hopefully that continues. All right, Alex, it is time to talk about your guy, DeAndre Carter. I want to frame it in this sense because Michael Bandy has also been showing up a lot recently, making a lot of plays, working with the first team offense, second team offense, which I think is at least a bit of a surprise. So we didn't necessarily think there was a legitimate battle in terms of like wide receiver 5, 6, if you will. But Michael Bandy has kind of made a name for himself. But DeAndre Carter certainly has done that as well, catching 2 touchdowns today. He had 2 really good grabs yesterday, including a touchdown. He's shown up as a receiver, and Brandon Staley spoke very highly of him today in that regard, saying that he got off to a really good start with Justin Herbert and company right from the gate in the spring, and they like how they can use him outside, inside as a ball carrier. So it was a good day for DeAndre Carter Island today.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's very disrespectful for you to say he's in a fight with Michael Bandy for wide receiver 5 or 6. Frankly, as far as I'm concerned, he's wide receiver 3C. All right, that is who DeAndre.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Everyone gets a trophy.
Yep. But yeah, no. I mean, in terms of their usage of Carter, I mean, now he has 4 red zone touchdown attempts when they've done red zone drills. They keep going back his way. Beat Michael Davis on a play today as well. I forget the other guy he beat off the top of my head, but I think it was one of the safeties. Don't remember.
He beat JT Woods yesterday, I think. I want to say.
Okay. Yeah, JT Woods. No, I just think it's really good for him going forward. And, Staley basically said it in his press conference today. Obviously didn't mention like Andre Roberts and KJ Hill by name, but he basically said, this guy DeAndre Carter is different, right, than what we've had previously at the punt returner, kick returner position, right, in the sense that we will be using him in our offense. So I think everything you've heard in camp pretty much lines up with DeAndre Carter being that like wide receiver 4 or 5, however you want to put it, and them actually using one. Michael Bandy is an interesting one just because obviously he was on the team last year. It seems like he has kind of like an outside chance to be a wide receiver 6 if they do end up keeping 6 receivers. Obviously kept 5 last year. But I got a lot of like Austin Prohl vibes from him sort of last year, where Prohl probably would have made the team or made the practice squad had he unfortunately not gotten hurt, before the first cuts. And that was kind of all there was there. But if Bandy stays healthy, and he's probably one of the only reliable like special teams offensive guys they have, it's pretty hard for him to not make the team, or pretty hard for him to not make that like team/practice squad, let's say. So I think that everything you're hearing about Michael Bandy and the fact that he can contribute to the offense in addition to what he does on special teams, I think is very good for him so far as well. But yeah, DeAndre Carter Island is having a fun time, and wide receiver 3C, here we come. But yeah, no, I am excited for both of them. But I think everything is going pretty well with the receivers so far.
It's working out very well. It seems like the guys, I mean, listen, they got 2 guys making $20 million. All that's good and taken care of. But you have this investment in Palmer last year, and it looks like he's doing very well. You signed Carter. He's been, I think, better than we expected so far. Granted, no NFL games yet, but it looks fantastic. You have Bandy, a guy you kind of took a chance on last year, who got a tiny bit of game action. He looks great. I think the only thing that's preventing Bandy from making this roster outside of stupid personnel decisions is DeAndre Carter. Like if they had Carter as only their return guy, like not Hopkins, Roberts last year, then yeah, Bandy has a shot. But Carter is so involved as a receiver that's kind of pushing Bandy off. But Bandy's showing out really well as well. And I think that he is, again, unlike Roundtree, unlike Stick, unlike some other people, worthy of a roster spot. But Carter, harken back to that first video I did with Carter. Like I said, hey, there's a chance that watching Carter, knowing what he can do, the Chargers may convince themselves to not go receiver at 17. We'll never really know exactly what they were going to do at 17 because they didn't have, one of the premium options there. But it seems like they're moving forward with Carter as this big part of their plan. And shoot, he's crushing it. I would love to see him with the first team. Again, we were seeing 4 touchdowns the last 2 days, thrown by Chase Daniel, thrown by Easton Stick. I think I want to see, or maybe I could be wrong, but I feel like he was facing the second team defense. So I'd like to see him face some of these better corners. How do you match up against JC Jackson? How do you match up against Asante Samuel Jr., Bryce Callahan? I think Bryce Callahan did break up a pass on him day 2. But he's doing fantastic. And I think the Chargers, if they feel like they missed out on a receiver at 17, maybe that's what they absolutely wanted, they should feel really good about the moves that they made, either before that, after that, whatever, to build out the receiving core. This is a very nice 1 through 5. And so far, I really needed them to convince me that Carter was worth bringing in over Roberts. Roberts being a second-team All-Pro returner. Like, you have to really convince me that on offense, it was worth bringing Carter in. And so far, he absolutely has.
Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised with Carter's vertical ability because I think when you watch what he did in Washington, it's a lot of, shorter routes, intermediate routes, whether that be bubble screens, handoffs, drags, slants, stuff like that. But he had a go route that was a contested catch situation, I believe, on Monday, that he converted for a big gain, if I'm remembering correctly, from Daniel Popper. He had a go route touchdown yesterday that he beat JT Woods on. So if he can offer them a lot of vertical threat ability, then I think, you're talking about, another speed up option outside of Jalen Guyton, which I think just gives them a lot of flexibility. And, you're talking about Donald Parham taking a bigger role in the vertical schemes as well. So I've been pleasantly surprised there. I was expecting him to be mostly a short area guy, which they certainly have a plan to do. It sounds like they're handing the ball off to him at least like once a day, getting him involved in short screens or drags and things like that. Because I think early on in the season, when they were trying to figure out who was going to be that guy before Roberts came along, before they wanted to get Jalen Guyton involved, they did a lot of short area things with Keenan Allen. And I love Keenan Allen, but that's just not who he is, man. So if they can get DeAndre Carter as well as Gerald Everett, he's certainly a part of that conversation. Just those opportunities for yards after contact, yards after catch, I think that's going to do a lot of good for the offense in terms of its overall efficiency, create some missed tackle opportunities as well. So not necessarily surprised that Carter is excelling in the short areas, but what he's done vertically so far has definitely been a pleasant surprise. Alex, you're muted.
Yeah, so he beat Dean Leonard per Daniel Popper's article on a go route that went for a 20-yard touchdown. Then jumped over Michael Davis on the leaping catch in the end zone, toe-tapping feet in the corner to get both feet down. Pretty impressive to jump over a guy who's 6'3", I guess.
Yeah, because Carter, I think, is like 5'9".
Yeah, he's not a big guy. Maybe that says a little bit more about Michael Davis there than it does DeAndre Carter, but I will take it either way. So that's good. Yeah, no, I mean, I think Tyler made a great point about the draft in terms of the Chargers. Obviously Jamison Williams was a rumor before, he got taken by the Lions. But it was like, hey, we need speed in this offense, right? So that was the whole thing with wide receiver at 17 this year in particular for Chargers fans who wanted that. And of course, DeAndre Carter is not Jameson Williams in any way as a prospect or a player. But if you're adding that speed threat, because Jalen Guyton is really the only other speed option you have in your wide receiver group. So having another player who is probably even faster than Jalen Guyton and, has more tangible speed on kick returns, punt returns, as opposed to, kind of just the straight line go routes. I think that has, taken this Chargers receiver group to a bit of another level here and added another dimension to the whole thing.
Yeah, Guyton so far, it's been a bit frustrating watching him, not necessarily just because of him, because the quarterback's just, it has to be like, he'll beat somebody, JT Woods, Dean Leonard, whatever, and it has to be this perfect ball that has to be placed, at this certain spot to get to Guyton, who does have a step on the corner, but it has to be perfect. If it's contested, if it's slightly, away from him to the outside, whatever, not really getting to it down the sideline. And that's so far, maybe I've missed it. I've been there the last couple of days. But so far, Guyton's been relegated just being that outside vertical threat, which is fine. That's a good skill set for him. I mean, he's good at it. But, Carter being able to work all over the field, I think just opens things up more. And someone did ask in the chat, is Carter ahead of Guyton as wide receiver, 3F or whatever? I don't think that's the case, but I actually think that he could be eventually. We'll see. Right now, again, Guyton is working more with Herbert. They do have that rapport. Haven't seen a lot of Herbert to Carter yet, so maybe that changes. The other thing, though, that you pointed out, and I forgot to mention, is Keenan Allen doing all that pre-snap motion sort of stuff, having to do the quick screens or whatever. Like, it seems like through camp that's no longer the case for Keenan Allen. Sure, they might throw a screen his way, and they did throw a screen his way, which he threw back across the field to Austin Eckler. Like, it seems like they're moving away from that being Keenan Allen's role, because that's not his thing. He's good at other things. And watching him for 17 games now, it's very clear that is what he does best, other than go routes, is attacking downfield. Slants as well, of course, because he's Keenan Allen, but he can work and win downfield. You don't want to put him in the pre-snap motion. Don't waste him, because he motioned behind the line of scrimmage and, dump it off to him. Don't waste it throwing a screen to him. Let Carter do that, because he's good at that. Yeah. So if that also opens up Keenan Allen to work downfield more, huge for the offense.
Yeah, so basically what I'm referring to here, so everybody kind of understands, like the Chargers run a ton of advantage read, run pass options, and they build them into basically every single rushing attempt that's not like a counter or a trap that's involving like a pulling guard. If they're just running like a duo or outside zone, like there's almost always a passing read built in for Justin Herbert, and a lot of the times that involves like a Keenan Allen bubble, like he's running a bubble route. And so people will say like, oh, they're just running screens, but that's not really what's happening. They're running in an RPO deliberately to try and create some extra yards for the offense. And sometimes that involves throwing a bubble route to Keenan Allen. And it's like, he'll get you the 4 free yards, but for the most part, he's not really giving you much after the free yards. And so I think, making those opportunities for DeAndre Carter, Gerald Everett, even Josh Palmer, I feel like would just be a more efficient way of attacking things. So I still think Jalen Guyton is going to have a role on this team. I still think from a reps perspective, he's going to be wide receiver 4, but because of Carter's ability to carry the football, if you told me that Carter had more touches by the end of the season, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. But I still definitely think from a snaps perspective that Jalen Guyton will be wide receiver 4 for this team.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing that you bring up the RPOs because, you have a team, or sort of what the Chargers are trying to do right now is a little bit similar to what the 2017 Eagles did with like very RPO heavy stuff, with Carson Wentz in that offense. And that offense in general was a little bit more anonymous because other than Alshon Jeffrey, it's not like they had like some huge playmaker who separated themselves from the rest of the roster. Versus, this Chargers team has Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, who are clearly wide receiver 1 and 2. You have Eckler, who's clearly running back 1. But I think if you run a heavy RPO offense, it just allows you to get more options involved and allows you to have just more tangible threats on the field, right? Even if the ball's not going to DeAndre Carter, just the defense having to account for him, right, is such a big thing versus some of the previous iterations of like the Chargers offense where it's like, we don't have to worry like a whole lot that like Justin Jackson's on the field if you're not going to use him, right? Like in that kind of sense. So I think that this incarnation of the Chargers offense, just having everyone as like a tangible threat on the field, I think is going to be very successful if the wide receivers, wide receiver room holds up.
Yeah, and that was one thing that, I harkening back to last summer when I interviewed Jeff Duncan, who covers the Saints and who wrote, the Sean Payton and Drew Brees book. That's something that he talked about from a receiver's perspective, is that the Saints wanted every single receiver to be able to run every single route. Like they were never into the whole idea of like, this guy runs go routes, this guy only runs screen routes, something like that. At least in theory, they want every receiver to run every single route. I know Tyler's done some great work charting Mike Williams, who mostly runs go routes, but like he does have the threat of running, drags, slants, things like that, hook routes, stick routes. So there at least has to be that threat there. So I think that's an important point to point about Jalen Guyton as well as DeAndre Carter. So anything else, you guys, from position battles that you wanted to mention from over the past few days?
No, I think we covered everything, honestly.
I think we did.
All right. So we'll take some questions now. I've seen some in the chat that we'll try and get to. Have to, of course, give a shout out to Tyler's mom for the super sticker. Always appreciate those. And as always, if you want to make sure your question gets answered, the super chat feature is enabled. So we'll take questions for about 10 minutes and then we'll get out of here for the day. It looks like we got Ross in the chat. So Ross was the winner of my Joey Bosa giveaway jersey the other day. So shout out to Ross. Appreciate the support. Howard Strike says J.K. Scott MVP. There's a lot of buzz around J.K. Scott right now. And, booming 70-yard punts in practice and, over 5-second hang time. So I really hope the guy is able to get back to what he was in 2019 and 2020. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough year. He's got a lot of pressure on him to perform. So I'm not fully on the J.K. Scott train yet, but, it's looking good so far. I'll say that.
From Kyle Tucker, how glad are you we didn't draft Trevor Penning?
Oh, here we go.
Oh my gosh. 3 fights in 3 days from Trevor Penning. He got kicked out of practice today. Their coach, Dennis Allen, was not happy about it happening again today. I think that there is a clear old culture mentality behind Trevor Penning. And, there used to be this like just fighting in practice culture in football that thankfully we have mostly moved past, because it serves no purpose. This benefits nobody. He gets kicked out of practice a half hour into practice today. He's trying to earn his spot in the Saints offensive line rotation and working with the backups. This guy needs these reps. Like, you are doing a disservice to yourself, and then you're also putting your teammates in danger. Like one of the videos from yesterday, the guy he like tried to take to the ground bent over so awkwardly. I thought he was going to tear his ACL. So, I hate to say I told you so to everybody who was a fan of Trevor Penning, but I'm not surprised at this. And the guy needs to figure it out. Otherwise, his own team is going to like vote him off the island. Like, you got to trade this guy.
Yeah. I mean, look, we all said this when we talked about Trevor Penning as a draft prospect during the draft. It was just like, well, like, yeah, this guy has high physical upside. You look at his build, you look at what he can be, but he also commits 500 penalties a game, and he is just like all over the place when it comes to his temperament, right?
Yeah.
And those are things that like teams consider. Yeah, maybe you can coach the penalties out of him. Maybe you can coach fighting out of him. Maybe you can do those things, and the Saints took a chance on it, and it still very well might pay off if you can get Trevor Penning to his full potential. But I just never thought that was the risk over a prospect like Zion Johnson, over a prospect like one of the receivers they could have taken, a cornerback, right? So for me, that was never the right choice at 17. And also, it's very clear that he's not ready to start out the gate right now. Imagine if we had like a Petting, Pipkins, Norton fight for the right tackle spot while he's fighting people. That certainly would have been an interesting storyline. But I just never bought the Trevor Penning thing. And as sky high as his potential was, I just thought there were too many things to fix as opposed to any of the other prospects that he drafted.
Yep, did all of that. I hope he turns out to be a fantastic player. I'm happy that we don't really have to find out on the Chargers, at least.
I know, and some Saints fans found my tweets this morning, and they're all loving it, man. They think it's fantastic, and I'm like, you guys are crazy, man. This is not beneficial to anybody at all. Like, you can be aggressive and not be an asshole. Like, should be smart.
I mean, they literally root for the team responsible for Bountygate. I'm not terribly surprised that Saints fans are.
That is very true. Question from Brian Leroux, I'm gonna guess. I hope I guessed right. Backup quarterback for the next 3 years: Easton Stick, Chase Daniel, or draft pick. I assume this means after this season, and if that's the case, I'm choosing a draft pick. Spend a 7th rounder on Brad Sorensen again, and figure it out that way.
I'll go Daniel. Why not? I mean, he's been there. He'll pick up his 1 year, $4 million contracts for the rest of his life. They seem to like having him in the quarterback room. Obviously, from the outset, it was just like a Staley pick, one of the like first free agents they signed. So I think that they're comfortable having Daniel as the QB2, and obviously, if Justin Herbert goes down, you're fucked anyway. So at this point, I could see it's definitely not going to be Stick. I think Daniel sticks around as QB2, and if they want to keep a 3rd quarterback after Stick expires next year, then they go the route in the draft.
For what it's worth, Chase Daniel will turn 36 in October.
Does it matter? He's a backup. How long have I'm sure there are like 40-year-old backups all the time. I mean, yeah.
He's played like 14 snaps though, so it's not the age, it's the mileage.
The mileage is strong.
Sure.
I think it would be Daniel. I think if they had drafted someone this year, then they think you can have him sit for a year, then transition to that backup. But Stick's gone, or is going to be gone, I would assume. And then next year they wouldn't draft a rookie to be the backup. So I think if it's not Daniel, then it's some sort of veteran. And if that's the case, like unless they're worried about Daniel's age, I think it is going to be Chase Daniel.
How old is Brian Hoyer? He's like 75 at this point. So, I mean, like, at this point, he's like the same thing as like Daniel. But,
Look, Brian.
Backup quarterback.
I think they're probably the same age. I would guess they're the same age.
Brian Hoyer is a year older. So he's already 36. Exactly. He'll turn 37 in October.
For a backup quarterback, for what they want, unless you're having like some, Tyrod Taylor, Justin Herbert dynamic where there's like, oh, it's a competition for QB1, right? Unless it's a scenario like that, then I think teams, especially with top end quarterbacks anyway, like a Mahomes, like a Rodgers is in a bit of a different position with the Jordan Love thing. But Mahomes has had like Chad Henne and all these guys. Josh Allen's had Trubisky and people come through.
Teresa said, bring back Tyrod Taylor. Honestly, Tyrod is welcome back in Los Angeles anytime he wants.
Exactly. Take another stab at it.
Shit.
Oh, jeez.
And that's why Andrew Whitworth follows me right there.
There you go. SoCal Line wants to know thoughts on Leatherwood potentially starting in the Hall of Fame games. Obviously, the Raiders have the Hall of Fame game tomorrow night. I've also heard that Alex Leatherwood has been working with the 3rd team offense. So potentially behind an undrafted free agent at guard and behind a 6th round Thayer Munford at right tackle. So I don't know, man. It's kind of a mess there.
At least the Raiders want him on their team. Tevin Jenkins is getting shipped out already.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would take either one at right tackle.
I think starting the Hall of Fame game is, that tells you what the team thinks about you.
Kevin Kernick said Andy Dalton will need a job next year. Sure.
fine.
Yeah.
How old is Andy Dalton? Like 32, 33?
Is he
Sure.
that old?
I would think so.
I guess he was drafted in like 2014.
But
He's not. He turns 30 in October. All these guys are October
Yeah.
birthdays. How funny.
Interesting.
Oh no, I'm sorry. He's 34 right now.
Yeah,
so
he couldn't be 30. Yeah, I
No.
was thinking. Yeah, when did he?
First thing I read was October 29th. That's his birthday, and I read that as he's 29.
Yeah,
so.
because I think he came out 2012 after TCU. I don't remember.
Man, that makes me feel so old. I remember the Andy Dalton, Brian Johnson, Mountain West, TCU, Utah battles back in the day.
Yeah, Rose Bowl champion Andy Dalton.
Did they win the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, they did. They beat Wisconsin, right?
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Back in the day before the conferences shifted 80 times.
I know. Quick shout out to Brent Kincaid for the super sticker. Appreciate that one. Anything else? I didn't really see anybody.
Not a ton of questions. A lot of comments on things. I think you hit most of it. I see people asking about Tillery being traded. I don't think that happens.
Can we talk about Robert Saleh saying Joe Flacco is a starting caliber quarterback today?
Yeah. As Clinton points out, he says he could see us pulling an Allen Trubisky dynamic, maybe Darnold or Flacco. Listen, like I think if you look at the backup quarterback spot as potential trade chips or potential comp picks, I think that's a good way to go about things. And I think the Bills got a 6th-round comp pick for Mitchell Trubisky this year. So I'm definitely not opposed to that kind of approach and taking shots on those kind of guys because, like Alex said, the QB2 is essentially another quarterback assistant coach. Like you're not really getting like a ton of value from that person. So, I mean, you can take some chances there on draft picks. You can take chances there on, what's the word I'm looking for? Reclamation projects, players like that, like Trubisky, Darnold, stuff like that. So
I assume they got a low-end comp pick for Tyrod Taylor too, right? Back in the day.
Who, the Bills?
No, I mean the Chargers.
Oh yeah, the Chargers had they got a 6th-round pick this year out of Tyrod.
Yeah, so I mean, similar concept in theory there. I don't know if anyone's gonna buy Darnold or Flacco to like be their QB1s or like QB1 competition guys, but there's going to be plenty of guys that, get let go or, just move on to different situations.
Yeah, because the Texans signed Tyrod to a decent contract, if I remember correctly.
Don't remember off the top of my head.
I'm looking on Over the Cap right now. Yeah, so the Texans signed him to a 2-year, $10 million deal. Then they cut him this year. So the Chargers I think they got a 6th-round pick for him.
The one that I can think of off the top of my head would be like Daniel Jones QB2, and then like you pawn him off to some team that like lets him fight for a job again after he looks good sitting on the bench behind Justin Herbert. Like that's the only one that like comes to my head in the vein of Trubisky, but
Out here, I can't find your question, man. So I
was looking for the same thing. Yeah, I can't find it.
Yeah, I've scrolled all the way up top, so I don't know. Good question here from Brian again. After the early training camp crowds think the narrative starts to change for the Bolts.
No,
I think it's certainly helped. I mean, Good Morning Football America talked about it today. Pat McAfee has talked about it. So I think it doesn't hurt, right? But this has to change in games. Like this is a game issue. This isn't a training camp issue. Like Tyler pointed out on Saturday, Danny Hoyt asked how many people at training camp were season ticket holders, and it was like 10% of the crowd or something like that.
Yeah, it was. I couldn't really tell who was a season ticket holder. It seemed like a good quarter or so. But yeah, then he asked who wasn't a season ticket holder, and it was just like, oh, we're all not season ticket holders, and it was it was unfortunate. I expect to be in the 10% of Chargers fans versus 90% of Raiders fans that are there week one. It's just the way it is. Chargers fans pay to go to games too. Don't just go to the free stuff. All right, pay for some stuff too.
Yeah, very uncontroversial thing to be like, oh, here's $5 for my training camp ticket. I'll take it. Versus $500 for games with SoFi Stadium prices, I would imagine. I think it's a good thing, right? I mean, it's definitely a good change from previous training camps, both pre and post COVID that we've seen for the Chargers. So it's definitely an upgrade from what we've seen from them in the past. But the big test is going to be when the Raiders come to town. The big test is going to be obviously when the Chiefs come to town and situations like that. Or even like last year, even though the Chargers had more fans that game, the Patriots one is an example where there were just some like empty seats, right? So and the stadium was like 3/4, 2/3 full, right? So that's kind of like another situation where I know people talk about like attendance and sold tickets, where the Chargers are doing well, and it's like, well, duh, they're doing well because they play in a 70,000 seat stadium. So it's kind of hard to not do well, right? If you're talking about attendance. So it's definitely a good start. And I think the Chargers are on the pathway, having Herbert and having all these things to doing better eventually. But does anyone want to put a bet that there's 40% Chargers fans at the Raiders game? Does anyone want to put that there's 40% Chargers fans even like against the Broncos when they come to town with Russell Wilson? I don't think so. That one might be slightly more likely, but like I still think the Chargers are kind of in that position. So they're definitely building. They're gonna get to a point where it's like, you have Chargers Giants last year where it's an overwhelming amount of Chargers fans in the stadium for sure. But they are still building towards it. It's a long-term process. It's not going to be 1 or 2 seasons like people on social media want it to be.
Yeah, I think like the Chargers have made a ton of progress with the fans, and I think there are certainly games from last year that was a little bit unfair. But I look at like the Chiefs game on Thursday night last year as
Absolutely
a way that the Chargers made a ton of progress. I mean, when I was there for the Browns game, it was like 70% Chargers fans. The test is always going to be like the higher profile games. You're talking about week 1 versus the Raiders. You're talking about Monday Night Football versus the Broncos that Alex mentioned. So those are the games that will really shift the narrative. If we get a CBS broadcast always talking about Raiders fans, then it's going to continue to be an issue, or Monday Night Football where they're talking about Raiders fans or Broncos fans or whatever. So it needs to change, and it needs to specifically change in primetime games for people to like really stop kind of hammering that point over our heads. But this is a good thing. It absolutely is a good thing that more people are at training camp. I know Karen, shout out Karen, posted a picture of her at training camp from like the first year in LA 2017, and it was her and like 35 other people. So the fan base has certainly come a long way, and it's great to see that those people are all showing out to training camp. So continue to go. I'm very jealous of anybody that gets to be at training camp. Wish I could make it down this year. So be sure to keep showing up.
It's a results-based thing too, as we see with the Chargers, right? If they get out to a slow start again, it's like, okay, well, they're 2-4, and that makes it hard to like build momentum. Versus you go back to that 2018 year where they're on that like 12-4 pace towards the end of the season, and even though they were struggling at StubHub, they ended up having that Saturday night game against the Ravens where they ended up losing that game, but they had a like really good number of fans in that stadium for what it was at that time. So I think it's just about getting those results and getting those wins. And if you get out to a 7-2, 8-3 kind of start, I think it would really get some momentum on their side.
You want to change the narrative in any particular game this year? Maybe the Raiders game would be nice. It's the Rams game. You like that is going to be the most talked about Chargers Rams fan attendance of any of the games this year. You have to, like, Chargers fans have to be 51% that game, or we're going to hear about it for years that it's the Rams in LA.
That's also a tough game, though, because I feel like that's going to be a game where a lot of celebrities and a lot of people like that come. So, like, do Chargers and Rams fans end up buying tickets, or do they just get outbid by, like, high-profile people? I don't know. Like, I definitely think that is one of the games, but yeah, I mean, aim to go to every game if you have the financial capabilities for that. No, I sure don't. But so it would be.
I mean, you're also going to be in a foreign country, and
that too. I would actually be back in America for the Rams game if I wanted to go to that. But ticket prices. We'll see what it's like in that game.
Sunday Night Football tickets on New Year's Day. That's gonna be a fun one.
More capital that I have room for, but yeah, I would just say anyone who wants to buy tickets, buy tickets. But the Chargers have approached this issue like it's a long-term issue, and they're slowly on the path to fixing it.
Yeah, and I think the Chargers are going to continue to make progress, right? Like with this quarterback and this offense and this team, as long as they keep winning, they'll continue to make progress, and I think they're on the right track there. So, Tyler, any final thoughts today, man, before we head out for the evening?
Nope, just been having fun. Can't wait to go see more padded practices.
Yeah, so if you are not following Tyler, I don't know what you're doing at this point. He's posting a ton of great content on Twitter about training camp. Make sure you have our notifications on because Tyler does all of those quick recaps after each practice that he attends to. Great information there, so make sure and check those out. Alex, any final thoughts, man?
Nope.
All right, so Alex is back at Bolt Beat. Make sure and check that out. He did an article about DeAndre Carter and Joshua Kelly and over the past couple of weeks as well. So lots of content coming your guys' way. Of course, we'll be going live on Saturday after that practice, and then we're also going live on Sunday night after the scrimmage. So we'll have 2 shows this weekend, so stay tuned for those. As always, if you are listening to this on a podcast platform of your choice, be sure to leave us a rating or review. Always appreciate that. That being said, that's going to do it. Have a good week. We'll talk to you guys later. Bolt up.